Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traore has created a lot of action since taking over in September 2022. Apart from taking prompt action against terrorists, reclaiming land, and initiating anti-corruption campaigns, he has also severed relations with France, courted Russia, and managed the difficult transition to civilian administration. Despite all this, people are still battling to ensure that Captain Ibrahim Traore is not leading the way in Burkina Faso. In this video, we will therefore be educating you on the most recent assault on Traore's life and the aftermath of all this. We will also discuss more about Russia in Africa. So, before we continue, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the new tourist channel so you get updates on what is happening in Africa. Following reports of gunshots close to the presidency last month, hundreds of protesters gathered in the country's capital to show support for Burkina Faso's military government. Protesters assembled at a roundabout in the heart of Ouagadougou and vowed to uphold President Ibrahim Traore's government. The protesters claimed that earlier in the afternoon, shots had been fired close to the presidential residence. They claimed they did not know what was going on, but they were there to stop anything from happening. Burkina Faso news agency AIB reported that an individual had tried to attack a guard at the palace, but there were no injuries or damage. However, security forces closed off access to the area around the palace. Since the elected President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore was overthrown by mutinying soldiers in 2022, the landlocked West African nation has been governed by a military government. Since Traore has decided to stand up for the rights of his people and his country, some people want him gone. This will not be happening anytime soon since the people of Burkina Faso are standing strong with what Traore is doing for them. They trust him. Russia has been strengthening ties as well with Burkina Faso. It is almost impossible to say that Traore will be removed from power by a coup. Russia will not allow this. Bear in mind that earlier this month, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, pledged more support to Burkina Faso in fighting militant groups as he pressed his whirlwind tour of West Africa in an attempt to fill a vacuum left by the region's traditional Western partners. Sergei Lavrov spoke at a news conference in the country's capital of Ouagadougou while on the third leg of his latest Africa trip, after Guinea and the Republic of Congo. Amid Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia is attempting to build up support from the area. Growing dissatisfaction with long-standing Western allies like France and the US has been voiced by some African nations recently. Lavrov stated, "Russian instructors have been working here and their number will increase," saying that Russia has assisted in the training of Burkina Faso's law enforcement and military forces. "We have supplied and will continue to supply military equipment to help strengthen Burkina Faso's defense capability and allow it to eliminate the remaining terrorist groups." Lavrov expressed gratitude for Burkina Faso's objective and fair stance on the conflict in Ukraine. He said they were prepared to lend their support to Africans fighting for their right to be free of neo-colonial control. Under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso has strengthened its military cooperation with Russia, seeking support from Moscow in its fight against armed groups. This partnership will go on for the next 5 years and more because Burkina Faso's military regime has extended its rule for 5 years under an accord adopted during national consultations. Countries across the Sahel, a region stretching from Senegal to the Red Sea, have turned toward Russia for security assistance in recent years in the face of growing regional instability. Russian mercenaries, for example, have supported the Burkina Faso and Malian armed forces in their fight against insurgent groups. Now, Russia is doubling down its focus on the region by tightening its hold over several Sahel states and looking for new partners further afield, a strategy that could pit it against other world powers. The next battleground may well be the coastal West African states. Russia's interests on the West African coast look to be in securing military, diplomatic, and economic pacts with leaders of these nations in exchange for strategic access to the Atlantic Ocean. This strategy mirrors how the U.S. military base in Djibouti, Camp Lemnier, provides the U.S. some access and control in the Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, and Suez Canal. Russia must balance its efforts to exert influence in Africa with its relationship with China. Under the presidency of Xi Jinping, China has also worked hard to grow its influence on the continent. Russia and China engage with countries in Africa in different ways. Russia uses military and diplomatic incentives to attract and retain partners on the continent. China instead uses developmental projects and heavy debt to draw African allies into its camp. The US and Russia are at odds over their influence in Africa. The current situation reflects the old struggle for partitioning Africa among major and emerging world powers, and it could trigger a proxy war among countries in Africa. The United States decreased engagement with Africa, particularly its 2018 decision to reduce counterterrorism efforts in the region despite the growing threat of terrorism in many African countries, has also coincided with Russia's return to the continent. Moscow moved quickly to close that gap in security. To strengthen Russia's reputation as a dependable strategic partner on the continent and to secure military contract agreements with various countries, President Putin hosted the first ever Russia-Africa summit in 2019 at the Black Sea retreat of Sochi. 17 African heads of state attended the second Russia-Africa summit in July 2023, despite the war, sanctions, and pressure from the West. There, they signed various agreements with Russia on preventing an arms race in space, cooperating in information security, and fighting terrorism on the continent. Moscow also pledged to write off further debt. During this summit, Putin also promised to deliver grain to some 6 African countries. In November of last year, Russia's agriculture minister said Moscow had begun free shipments of grain totaling up to 200,000 tons to 6 African countries, as promised by President Vladimir Putin. It will also be good to know that Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation of 20 million, has been ravaged in the past 8 years by violence from extremist groups loosely affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group, and from the fighting between government forces and the militants. Additionally, in less than 10 months, the nation saw 2 coups. The second occurred in September 2022, during which the military leaders expelled French personnel and looked to Russia for security assistance. The leaders have had trouble controlling the humanitarian and security situation, nevertheless. Note that Burkina Faso's military leaders also received a fresh consignment of military drones from Turkey earlier this month as part of their assistance in the fight against terrorism. Also bear in mind that for the second consecutive year, Burkina Faso has led the list of the most overlooked crises in the world, according to the Norwegian Refugee Council. According to the relief agency, 6.3 million out of 20 million people, many of whom are starving, will require humanitarian assistance this year. There are still 2 million internally displaced individuals, and about 60% of them are children. There are few resources available to assist those who have experienced trauma. Moving away from Russia, Senegal's new President Bassirou Diomaye Faye began his first visit to Mali and Burkina Faso last month to strengthen ties with these 2 states, which have quit the regional bloc ECOWAS. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are all under military rule following coups. These 3 countries declared in January that they were leaving the Economic Community of West African States, claiming it was influenced by France to form the Alliance of Sahel States, their own regional organization. Faye arrived in Mali's capital and proceeded to the presidential palace, where he was scheduled to meet with Colonel Assimi Goïta, the leader of the military government. He later on visited Burkina Faso to see Ibrahim Traoré. Since these countries will be working together, it also means Russia will definitely have a place in Senegal. Russia's backing of Ibrahim Traoré is an issue that sparks discussions among people with different viewpoints and poses a lot of issues. Some contend that Russia's support for Traoré is a calculated attempt to increase its influence in the area, while others see it as a show of unity and solidarity with a leader who embodies their principles. Whatever the reasons for Russia's backing, it is obvious that this partnership has important ramifications for Russia as well as Traoré. Traoré feels more legitimate and more secure in his place on the global scene with the support of a powerful nation such as Russia. Additionally, it gives him access to knowledge and resources that will help him in his efforts to promote economic expansion and political stability. Nonetheless, it is critical to recognize the possible repercussions of this kind of assistance. The partnership may help Traoré in the near run, but it's unclear what will happen to his nation and its people in the long run. Do you think there will be any problems between Russia and Burkina Faso in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the new Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too so you get notified whenever we upload videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.